Hello everyone, welcome back to the Polyglot grind once again as always. In this video, as the title states, I'm going to talk about how I learned Portuguese in a pub. Yes, I learned Portuguese in a pub. Okay, so my Portuguese story starts back in 2014. I started learning Portuguese around the same time that the World Cup was starting. So my reasoning behind learning Portuguese is like kind of weird and unconventional. Like the average person doesn't, at least the people I know, don't learn languages for this reason. But anyway, the reason I wanted to learn Portuguese is there were a lot of times where I'd be out and I would hear Spanish being spoken, and then like if you want to get good in the language you have to practice. So I would approach the people and then obviously politely and everything, not aggressively, and then I would talk to them. But the problem was they weren't actually speaking Spanish. They were speaking Portuguese. And back then, like obviously I was aware of the fact that Portuguese and Spanish were two different languages. But from far away to like my untrained ear, Portuguese sounded like Spanish. So I'd always approach them and like hope to practice Spanish. A lot of the times they'd always be Brazilian. And then so it got to the point where I was like, I should honestly just learn Portuguese. That way I won't be passing up these opportunities. If I approach someone thinking they're speaking Spanish, and then they're actually Brazilian, then I can talk to them and I can still get practice. I remember I missioned to the mall because I could only find one good Portuguese book. I don't remember being able to find any at the library, if I remember correctly, but anyway, I missioned to the mall and then I bought Living Language Portuguese and Teach Yourself Portuguese. I tried to use Teach Yourself first, but I didn't like the layout, so I ended up like just stopping. And then I ended up using Living Language Portuguese instead. And then I studied it for a bit. I still wasn't that good at learning languages back then. Like I was a lot better than when I was learning German, but like I still didn't really completely know what I was doing. So I remember I just went through the book. I tried to avoid the grammar and stuff, and then I would go out and use it. So I didn't learn all of my Portuguese in the pub, but like I would say like a good at least 60-70% was learned in that pub. But anyway, I remember I would like the very first time I used the book and I learned like just basic stuff, like just how to say hi, how are you and stuff, are you Brazilian. I remember I went straight to Toronto and then I started like practicing with people on the street. And I remember the very first time I actually spoke Portuguese, the first time I actually summoned enough courage to speak Portuguese was in front of a McDonald's, if I remember. And then I think Brazil had just won a game, so there's a lot of people walking outside, or Brazil was playing that day, I can't remember, but there's a lot of people walking around wearing Brazilian like jerseys and stuff. And then so I remember I was at McDonald's, I ordered food, and then I remember as I was walking in, there was like these three people, they were standing like outside of the McDonald's. I think they were waiting for a friend. And then I walked by, I heard them speaking Portuguese, and I was like, okay, I have to talk to these people. I have to finally get this practice in, even though I could hardly say anything. So I remember I went into the McDonald's, I ordered my food, and then on the way out, I walked up to them, and then I must have sounded like a baby or something, like how limited my Portuguese was, but I was so determined to only speak Portuguese. So like I remember I walked up to them, and then I said like, excuse me in Portuguese, and then I had to like point, I had to like use body language. I was like, você Brasil, Brasil, Brasil. Kind of like I don't know, like someone who like literally knew no English and just arrived to Canada. I was like, você Brasil, Brasil, Brasil. Eu falo. And then they kind of smiled, and then they actually stopped and talked to me. I was shocked because I thought like they were just gonna walk away because of how like basic my Portuguese was. But we had like a really basic conversation. I could understand what they were saying back to me because I could just rely on Spanish, but it was so hard for me to speak. But I got the Portuguese in. I was so happy that I'd spoken Portuguese for the first time. And then where does it go after this? So I remember I practiced Portuguese a couple times at like a language meetup, but I was still very bad and very basic, and I was still sounding like a caveman, pointing like eu canadense, like I'm Canadian, just like a caveman. And then I remember one day a friend of mine, she said her and her friends were going to a restaurant, and then after they were going to this pub. So I was like, I didn't really want to check out the pub because like I'd been there before on like a bad day, and it was like really quiet and dead, and I was like, I don't really want to go back to this pub. But I was like, you know what, like I'm gonna be in Toronto anyway, like why not just join them at the restaurant, hang out, and then afterwards I'll like go do something else. And then so I remember we went to the restaurant, we chilled, hung out, it was a lot of fun. The food was really good. And then I remember they were like, okay, now we're gonna go to the pub. And then I remember I really didn't want to go to this pub. I really didn't want to go. I just wanted to go back home. But like, I don't know why. For some reason, I was like, you know what? Let me just check it out for a bit and then I'll go home after. So I got on the streetcar with them and we went to the pub. And then I walked in, and then I remember these two Colombian girls approached them because like they were from the same language school or something. And then they talked. And then I was like, no way. There's international people here. So I started talking to them. They were speaking in Spanish and stuff, and it was really cool. And then some more South Americans came and we were all talking. And then it started to dawn on me how many international students there were like in this one building. And then I was like, okay, like I gotta find some Brazilians. And then I remember I was also waiting on my friend to arrive. So my friend arrived, and then we were chilling a bit. I was feeling pretty good at this point. I was feeling pretty good because when I get to speak languages for a while, I kind of get this rush going. It kind of feels like a jogger's high. Like this is what keeps me coming back to like learning languages. So I had like a let's call it a linguistic high. I had a bit of like a linguistic high rush, whatever you want to call it, going. And then so I saw a group of internationals sitting down. And then so I remember I approached the group. I don't really remember what I said, but like I approached them, and I think one of the guys knew my friend, so he was talking to my friend. And then like if you don't mind me asking, like, where are you from, by the way? He's like, I'm from Brazil. I was like, oh, no way. So then I started speaking to him in Portuguese, and like my caveman Portuguese. And then he actually talked to me. And then there was like a girl sitting across the table from us, if I remember correctly. And she's like, yeah, she's Brazilian too. And I was like, no way. And then I turned to her and then started talking. I did my best to get this conversation to flow. Like I was trying to do my best because like I didn't really want to stress this girl out with like my bad Portuguese. So I did my best to talk to her. And then she was actually really patient. I was absolutely shocked. And then she spoke back to me in Portuguese, and we actually had like a fluent Portuguese conversation. And then I remember at the end of that night, I went home, and then I was just absolutely shocked at like such a place existed where there was so many international students. And then I was just so happy that I got to like practice Portuguese. I felt so good. And then I was still feeling that linguistic high or whatever. So I felt so good, and I was like, okay, like I have to come back to this place. And then so I remember like at the time this kind of seemed like a curse, but like looking back on it now, it's kind of like a blessing. But I remember I went back to the pub, and then I was supposed to meet up with my friend. And then so I got there, I'm lining up, and then he's like late, and I was like kind of annoyed. I was like, come on, man, like I'm not trying to be in the pub alone. And then so he's late, and then so I get in, they check my ID or whatever, I go in, and then now I'm in the pub, so I'm just waiting for this guy. And then he texts me and he's like, okay, I'm not coming. So like, you have to be kidding me. Cause like Toronto is kind of far. It's kind of expensive to go to Toronto and back. So I'm like, I spent like $20, well, like $10 to go there, $10 to come back. So like, I will have spent like $20 tonight just on transportation. And then now I'm alone in this pub. Like, what am I supposed to do? So I was like, you know what? There's international students here. So if I'm stuck here, I'm gonna make this worth my while. So I tried this trick. I remember there was a table and they were chilling. Like I walked up, I knew they were international. So I had this icebreaker I'd always use, and I use this over and over and over and over and over and over again. And this probably isn't going to work now if somebody watches this video before they meet me, because like now they're going to know what I'm doing. But I'd walk up and then I would be like, excuse me, like, do you know what time it is? The funny thing is, a lot of the time when I would ask this, I would have my phone in my hand, but like nobody ever called me out on that. But I'm like, excuse me, do you know what time it is? Or like, excuse me, do you know what time the subway closes? Or excuse me, do you know what time this place starts to pick up? And I knew the answer to all these questions. I knew what time it is because I had my phone on me. I knew what time the subway closes because like I've seen the schedule before, and I knew what time this place picked up because like I had been there once before. But I would do that, and the person would answer me in like with like an accent, and I'd be like, oh, like where are you from, by the way? And they'd be like, oh, I'm from Brazil, or I'm from France, or I'm from Germany. And then like I would just go into their language, and then that would always get everyone's attention at the table, and they would always turn to me like, oh no, wait, like this guy's speaking their language. And then after a while, like everybody would always be so shocked at like why I learned all their languages that they'd be like, okay, just come sit down. And then so like I would sit down, and then so like that specific time I sat down, and then we all talked. I got to practice a bunch of languages, and then like it just like dawned on me. I was like, no way. And then so I went up to a couple more tables that night, and then I kept doing the same thing, and it kept working. And then so the following week, my friend flopped on me again. So I went in. This is after I lined up. I was there. I was like, okay, man, like you flopped on me last week, don't flop on me again. So I was there, flopped again. And then so I was like, you know what? Like last week I did that. I talked to all the internationals. It worked. Let's try it again. So I went around, same thing. It worked. Everybody was really like open to talk to me and stuff. And like I have to practice a lot of languages. So I was like, okay, like cool, like I can keep doing this. So it got to the point where I would purposely go to the pub alone. Like I would just purposely go. Like I would literally go with the intention. I already knew my buddy would flop on me. So I would just go, and I was like, okay, please flop. Because like if you flop, I could just go talk to everyone, practice all these languages. I forgot to add this part in. It got to the point where it was almost like I was famous. It was weird. It was just weird. Like people, like everyone just seemed to know who I was in that pub. I was famous in that pub. It was weird. Like I would step into the pub, and then I'd be famous, and then the second I stepped foot back outside, then I was a normal person again. It was literally only inside that pub. It was really weird. I remember one time this girl from, I think she was from Taiwan, actually asked me if like she could take a photo of me. She's like, we've heard about you at our school or whatever, our whole school talks about you, you're famous, I want to take a picture. I was like, wow, like no way. Yeah, so like that happened. And then one thing is like I was always aware of the fact that if someone didn't want to talk to me, they don't have to talk to me. Like they're not legally obliged to talk to me. If I approached a table and they weren't down to talk, then my feelings weren't hurt. I wouldn't be confrontational. I understand, like they're there hanging out with their friends, and then I'd be like, okay, cool, and I would just move on to the next one. I don't know, out of all the times I did it, I think I had like 2 or 3 like experiences where like the people were not like, yo, come join our table, come join our table. So if anyone else is gonna go try doing this, just make sure you're aware of that. Not everyone is gonna want to talk to you. A lot of people will, some people won't. Like, just be aware of that. Don't bother people. If they don't want to talk, then they don't want to talk. Move on. But yeah, okay, back to the main video. So like every week I'd be at this pub, and then what would happen is like after doing that trick a couple times, that like, do you know what time it is? Do you know what time the subway closes? People would start to recognize me. So like there was times where like I would walk in, and then like somebody would be like, oh my goodness, like you're the guy who speaks 7 languages. And then like they would bring their friends to come meet me. And then so I started like creating like a social circle in this pub, and then it was like amazing for practicing languages. Like I got to practice like every single language like every time I would go there. It was amazing. And then so after a while I had met like a good amount of Brazilians, and my Portuguese had improved from like going to this pub, going to language meetups, watching YouTube videos, going home, studying more, than going back out. So my Portuguese was getting better. And then I remember because I'd met so many Brazilians, I was like I had also developed like a Brazilian social circle. So the Brazilians would see me and they would introduce me to more Brazilians. So I would go in and like I could just speak Portuguese like almost the whole night, because like we had a joke there. We would say like, in this bar you're more likely to hear Portuguese than you are to hear English. So I'd go there every single week, and I would practice like every single week, and my Portuguese started getting better and better and better. And then it got to the point where, because I learned Spanish before Portuguese, so the Portuguese started destroying my Spanish. When I would try and speak Spanish, Portuguese would come out, and I couldn't think in Spanish anymore because it was mixed up with Portuguese words. And then my Portuguese got better than my Spanish, and then I was getting kind of worried, but I was loving it. I was practicing Portuguese like every single week for like a good amount of time while I was there. And then I continued this for quite a while, and then I ended up getting bored. I think like I'd studied Portuguese for about 5 months, and then I got bored, and then so I kind of stopped, and then I moved on to like, I think I moved into Dutch. But then I think this was like last summer, I started to like get out my Portuguese book again because it had been so long, and just like go through it. And then it's weird, like it's like I went through the book and my Portuguese got worse. It doesn't make sense, but like my Portuguese seemed to get worse, and it was like a lot harder for me to speak. But then that was pretty much it. Oh, and then so my Portuguese got worse after going through that book, and I wasn't really focusing on it. Like if I saw Brazilians out, I would always try and talk to them. But my Portuguese, it felt like it was going down because I wasn't really using it anymore. Like the spark that made me love the language so much was kind of gone. Then I remember later on I started using this website called conversationexchange.com, and I met a couple of Brazilians on the website, but we would talk a bit and then we wouldn't really talk that much after a while. Like it would always like kind of fizzle out, because like I noticed a lot of people on that website are really busy, so it can be really hard to like have consistent practice. But then I remember there was this one girl I used to practice with, like I think she wanted to learn English originally, but then she was really patient and really friendly, and then she would just let me speak Portuguese to her. And I remember we would like I had a lot of questions about Brazil, and she had a lot of questions about Canada, so we would talk for like long periods of time, like hours, sometimes hours of only speaking Portuguese. And I remember she told me that she didn't really speak English that well, so like I had to speak Portuguese. So like that was really good for me. I really hope I can like repay the favor to like her and like all the other Brazilians that talk to me, because like they really helped me a lot with my Portuguese. So that helped me start getting like thinking in Portuguese again, because like I was forced to speak it again, and that was really cool. And I think that's about it. Like that leads into today. Like the Portuguese story isn't that crazy, because like it's not crazy like learning German on Xbox, because I learned it like I started in 2014, and like in 2014 I didn't really know what I was doing that much, but my method was a lot better than when I was learning German. So Portuguese was pretty standard. And then yeah, I really haven't touched back on Portuguese that much since. I try to read the news before I go to bed every night in Portuguese, just to learn more vocabulary and keep it going, but that's pretty much it. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. I hope you're not bored, and more videos to come soon.